Hey explorers, and welcome to the last video in this series. Today, we are investigating the various organisms living in our hydrosphere that are responsible for blue carbon storage. So grab your life vest and let's go! So far, we have learned what blue carbon is, the role of water in its story, and the names of a few of our blue carbon capturers. Now, we are ready to take a look at how these blue carbon systems function and effectively store atmospheric carbon in our coastal and marine habitats. After all, our oceans are responsible for sequestering roughly 2 billion tons of carbon annually. When we are discussing carbon storage, it's important that we acknowledge the two ways in which it is stored. Carbon can be stored in these systems either on a short-term or a long-term basis. Short-term carbon storage refers to carbon that helps build the bodies or structures of organisms. It's the carbon that remains in the bodies of organisms for their lifespan. Short-term carbon storage in blue carbon systems revolves around the processes of photosynthesis and calcification. Long-term carbon storage refers to carbon that is stored away from the atmosphere more permanently and may be processed over periods of time. Carbon stored for long-term periods in our blue carbon systems relies on the process of sedimentation. Let's first investigate the two short-term processes, beginning with photosynthesis. The photosynthetic organisms of our blue carbon story are mangroves, seagrasses, phytoplankton, salt or tidal marshes, and kelp. Let's examine how photosynthesis aids in carbon sequestration. Photosynthetic means that these organisms will create their own food in the form of sugar or glucose. So, how does this process occur? As we can see here, carbon dioxide occupies our atmosphere. Along our coasts and in our oceans, there are mangroves, salt marshes, seagrass meadows, and kelp forests. Phytoplankton drift throughout the seas. Atmospheric carbon dioxide is taken and stored by these organisms to make energy and used within their structures. When conducting photosynthesis, these organisms use carbon dioxide, water, and some sunlight to convert these compounds into glucose. 6 molecules of CO2 plus 6 molecules of H2O produce 1 molecule of C6H12O6, the other name of glucose, and 6 molecules of O2, or dioxygen, or what we commonly refer to as oxygen. Just as carbon dioxide is taken in, oxygen molecules are released by the photosynthetic organisms as a byproduct of the reaction. Now that we've learned how our photosynthetic blue carbon systems capture carbon, let's take a look at the other short-term carbon storage process. Another short-term carbon storage process is calcification. Calcification is the process of marine organisms forming calcium carbonate using nutrients, ions, and other compounds in the water. The shellfish of our blue carbon systems include clams, oysters, and mussels, all of which need calcium carbonate to build their shells. Briefly, let's once again take a look at the calcification process, which is the process by which these organisms form calcium carbonate. Earth's atmosphere pushes carbon dioxide into the surfaces of our waters. Carbon dioxide then combines with water and forms carbonic acid, H2CO3. This acid eventually breaks down into carbonate ions that are used by shellfish and coral reefs. Now the calcification itself can begin. Oysters, mussels, and clams filter the carbonate ions and calcium present in the waters to form calcium carbonate, which is then used to build their shells and skeletons. For example, about 12% of an oyster shell is made of carbon. Again, this calcium carbonate formation undertaken by shellfish is a form of short-term carbon storage. Now that we understand how some of our blue carbon systems partake in short-term carbon storage, we can take a look at long-term carbon storage. This is the carbon sequestered into the sediment surrounding the roots of photosynthetic organisms, or the carbon buried in the depths of our oceans. Long-term carbon capture occurs when living seagrasses, kelp, mangroves, and salt marshes transport the carbon they absorb in their bodies through their roots and into the sediment they are rooted in. The long-term storage of atmospheric carbon also occurs when our blue carbon systems have died and decomposed. The plant organisms will shed leaves and decompose, taking the carbon once stored in their bodies and breaking it down into the coastal sediment. Our phytoplankton, kelp, and shellfish will sink to the seafloor, where their bodies and shells are buried along with the carbon stored within them. Decayal and decomposition effectively bury the carbon stored in the organism's body into the sediment to be stored for long periods of time. Both short-term and long-term carbon storage are important. However, long-term carbon storage has a greater impact and shows the value of our blue carbon systems as carbon sequesterers, who are responsible for storing even more carbon than their terrestrial counterparts. So say thank you to our blue carbon systems and appreciate all that they do for us here on Earth. Let's protect them. Thanks for exploring, and feel free to check out our webpage and explore blue carbon further. We also encourage you to partake in your own investigations on the topic.